Pet Sematary is a horror novel by Stephen King, first published in 1983. It explores themes of grief, death, and the devastating consequences of meddling with forces beyond human control. At its core, the novel is a chilling examination of a family's descent into despair after experiencing tragic loss. It delves deeply into human emotions, showing how far someone might go to reverse fate, even when the cost is unspeakably horrific. The story centers around the Creed family, consisting of Lewis Creed, his wife Rachel, and their two children, Ellie, a young girl, and Gage, a toddler. The family moves from Chicago to a small rural town called Ludlow, Maine, where Lewis takes a job as the director of campus health services at the University of Maine. The Creeds are excited to start a new life in the countryside, moving into a large house with plenty of land. Not far from their property, a busy road runs where trucks often speed through at dangerous speeds. Shortly after settling in, they meet their elderly neighbor, Judd Crandall, who becomes close to the family, especially Louis. Judd is wise, kind, and fatherly, and he introduces the Creeds to the area, including a path behind their home that leads to a mysterious cemetery. Judd takes the Creeds to a hidden spot deep in the woods known as the Pet Sematary, where local children have buried their pets for generations. The cemetery has a haunting, eerie atmosphere, and it's marked by handmade graves for dogs, cats, and other animals that had been killed, often by the fast-moving trucks on the road nearby. The atmosphere feels unsettling, but it also strikes a chord with Louis as a reflection of the inevitability of death and the lengths people go to preserve the memory of their lost loved ones, even pets. Ellie becomes distressed at the thought of death when she sees the cemetery, and this triggers a conversation between Louis and Rachel about how to handle death with children. Rachel is particularly uncomfortable with the topic due to a traumatic experience from her childhood involving her sister Zelda, who died of spinal meningitis. The memory of her sister's agonizing death has left Rachel with a deep fear of death and sickness, which becomes a recurring theme in the novel. Shortly after their visit to the pet cemetery, tragedy strikes when the Creed family's beloved cat, Church, short for Winston Churchill, is hit by a truck and killed. Louis dreads breaking the news to Ellie, fearing the pain and questions about death that will arise. Seeing Louis' distress, Judd offers a solution, one that is strange and ominous. He takes Louis on a late-night journey beyond the boundaries of the pet cemetery to an ancient burial ground farther in the woods, where the Micmac tribe once buried their dead. Judd explains that this burial ground has a strange power. It can bring things back to life. Louis buries Church there, and the next day, the cat indeed returns. But it is not the same. Church smells of the grave, his movements are sluggish, and his demeanor has changed. While he's alive again, he has lost the essence of what made him a beloved pet. Instead of bringing joy, Church now brings a sense of unease and dread into the Creed home. The novel takes a devastating turn when Gage, Lewis's young son, is tragically killed. One day, while playing outside, Gage runs into the road and is hit by a speeding truck. The family is plunged into grief, with Rachel particularly struggling to cope with the overwhelming sorrow. Louis is consumed by guilt, anger, and helplessness. The loss of his son leaves him emotionally shattered, and he begins to spiral, questioning everything he knows about life and death. As Louis mourns Gage, his thoughts keep returning to the power of the burial ground. Even though Judd warns him repeatedly about its dangers, telling him that sometimes dead is better, Louis becomes obsessed with the possibility of using the burial ground to bring Gage back. Judd reveals that he had once seen a human buried in the Micmac burial ground. The result was a grotesque and dangerous mockery of life. He pleads with Louis not to make the same mistake. Despite Judd's warnings and the knowledge of the unnatural results that the burial ground produces, Lewis's grief over Gage's death overpowers his rationality. Against his better judgment and driven by desperation, Lewis digs up Gage's body and brings him to the burial ground. hoping against hope that his son will come back as he was before the accident. Gage does return, but like Church, he is not the same. The child that comes back is a twisted, malevolent version of the boy Lewis once knew. Gage is filled with a terrifying, unnatural evil, far removed from the innocent child who died. The resurrected Gage embarks on a violent killing spree, first targeting Judd Crandall, who had tried to prevent this from happening. At the same time, Rachel, who had been away visiting her parents, rushes back to Ludlow after sensing that something is horribly wrong. By the time she returns, it is too late. Gage kills her as well, completing the cycle of death and destruction that has overtaken the Creed family. In a final confrontation, Louis is forced to face the horrible reality of what he has done. He must kill the creature that was once his son. Broken and traumatized by the carnage, Louis's mind finally snaps under the weight of his actions. Despite the catastrophic results of using the burial ground, Louis remains in denial about its true nature. In the final, haunting pages of the novel, Louis carries Rachel's body to the Micmac burial ground, convinced that this time it will be different, that he can bring her back without the terrible consequences he faced with Church and Gage. As the book closes, Louis sits in his home, waiting for Rachel to return. The last scene is one of chilling ambiguity. Rachel does return, but her reanimated body is clearly twisted and malevolent, just as Gage's was. The novel ends with her cold hand on Louis's shoulder and the single whispered word, "darling," leaving the reader with a sense of inescapable doom. Pet Sematary is a dark exploration of grief, death, and the human desire to undo loss. Louis's tragic decisions reflect the impossibility of accepting death, as he pushes against natural boundaries in a futile attempt to reclaim what has been lost. King delves deeply into the emotional landscape of a father's grief, showing how it leads Louis to defy reason and morality.